Montana Territory, July 1878. The sun had barely crested over the high ridge when Gideon Kirkland spotted her riding hard across the open valley, wild hair flying, skirts hitched high for freedom, not modesty. There was dust in her wake and fire in her eyes. He pulled his gelding to a stop, heart thudding. She was not running for pleasure. She was running from something. Two children clung to the back of her saddle. Gideon nudged his horse forward, slow and steady. No sudden moves. You did not chase a woman like that. You rode beside her, quiet and ready, until she decided you were not the threat. She looked over her shoulder and caught sight of him. Her jaw tightened. She veered left toward the canyon cut, but the terrain would slow her. She had to know it. He kept pace, not gaining, not falling behind. Just there, just riding beside her. "You got someone on your tail," he called, voice low and calm. She did not answer, just shifted in her saddle, gripping the reins tighter. The boy clinging to her waist, maybe 7 or 8, looked up at her, eyes wide with fear. The girl, smaller, hid her face. "I ain't here to stop you," Gideon said. "Just want to know if you need help." Silence, only the hooves and the wind. But then her horse faltered, a slip on the loose shale near the canyon rim. She cursed under her breath and slowed. The boy yelped, holding tighter. Gideon eased in closer. "Let us get off this slope," he said. "There is a dry creek just past that stand of pines. You can catch your breath there." She hesitated, then nodded once, not to him, just to herself. She turned her horse toward the trees. They reached the creek 10 minutes later. The kids were pale with heat. The boy slid off and half collapsed in the shade. The girl whimpered as she was lifted down. Gideon dismounted. "Got water," he said, offering his canteen. She took it with shaking hands and helped the children drink. Only then did she stand straight and meet his eyes. "I do not need saving," she said flatly. "I believe you," Gideon said, "but they might." She looked at her kids, her jaw clenched hard, and nodded once. "I am Gideon Kirkland, been driving cattle east from Fort Benton, saw you from the ridge." She lowered the canteen. "Vera Callahan." "These are my children, James and Josie. Are they hurt?" "No, just scared," he nodded. "Someone after you," she hesitated. "My husband is dead, been 3 weeks. Man he owed money to came around 2 nights back, meant to collect more than coin." Gideon's jaw tightened. "You got away." "Barely." "Took the horse and got out before he came back with others. I do not know how far they are behind." "You got a plan," she shook her head. "Just keep moving." "That is not a plan, that is running." She crossed her arms. "You got something better." He looked at her, really looked. She was tough. Lean and sun-browned, eyes sharp, but she was tired too, scared though she would never admit it. The kids were worn to the bone. "I know a place," Gideon said. "Old trapper's cabin about 2 miles west. It is quiet, hidden. You can rest, just for tonight." She did not answer. Just looked down at her son. His small hands trembled as he drank water. "All right," she said finally. "One night." They rode in silence, Vera keeping the children between them. Gideon did not press, just kept his pace even, never crowding her. The wind rustled through the tall grass and the sun lifted higher. By midday they reached the cabin, half sunk into a hillside, moss grown thick over the roof. Vera dismounted first and helped her children down. They stood near her, close as shadows. Gideon opened the door. "It is not much, but it is dry. Got a cot, a stove, and a back door if you need one." She glanced at the woods, always watching for escape. "I will sleep outside," he added, laying out his bedroll on the porch. "You will hear me if anything comes." Vera nodded. "Thank you." He stepped back. "You want to tell me what kind of men we are dealing with?" She was silent for a while, then said, "Name is Royce Harland. Runs a saloon in Helena. Loans coin to desperate men. When they cannot pay, he takes what he wants. My husband, he was a fool, but he did not deserve to die like that. And you?" I told him no, that is all it took. Gideon looked at her and something in his chest pulled tight. "You are safe now." Her eyes flicked to him, uncertain, like she did not know how to believe it yet. He nodded once more and turned to tend his horse. That night, Vera sat inside, her children curled up beside her on the cot. Through the small window, she watched Gideon by the fire, quiet, solid, eyes always scanning the trees. He did not ask questions, did not crowd her, just kept watch. She had met too many men who made themselves the center of everything. Gideon just made space and held it steady. She had not known a man like that before. In the morning, she stepped outside. The air was crisp, the fire still warm. "You do not ask much," she said. "I figure you will say what you want when you are ready." Vera studied him. "Most men try to fix things, or fix me. I ain't most men." "No," she said quietly, "you are not." James came out, rubbing his eyes. Gideon handed him a strip of dried meat without a word. The boy took it, murmured thanks, and sat near the fire. Vera watched the quiet between them, the ease. Her heart ached a little, but not from pain, from something else. "Where are you going next?" she asked. "East, toward Miles City. Work waiting there." She hesitated. "We were headed that way before everything." He looked up. "Then ride with me." She narrowed her eyes. "You want me to trust you?" "No," he said. "I want you to trust the ride. I will ride beside you, that is all." She looked at her children, then back at him. "All right," she said. We ride east. And for the first time in weeks, she felt like she could breathe again. The old trapper's cabin sat quiet behind them as they rode out just after dawn. The air was thick with dew and the scent of pine bark peeling in the sun. Vera rode with Josie in front of her, cradled close against her chest. James had insisted on riding behind Gideon, gripping the saddle horn with small, determined hands. The boy didn't speak much, but he watched everything like his mother. They kept off the main trail, winding through stands of lodgepole pine and cottonwood, the horses moving at an even pace. Vera didn't ask questions, and Gideon didn't offer any. He kept his eyes ahead and let her come to her own conclusions about the direction they traveled. She didn't seem the type to appreciate being led, even for her own good. By mid-morning, they reached a stand of rock formations shaped by wind and time into strange spires and arches. Gideon slowed his horse and pointed to one that curved like a bent finger. "Used to come up this way with my older brother. He swore that rock was the hand of the earth trying to point us home." Vera didn't laugh, but her mouth twitched. "Didn't seem to work if you're still out here looking. Maybe home isn't a place you find. Maybe it's something you build." She looked away at that and said nothing for a long stretch of road. They made camp before dusk beside a slow creek lined with willow. Josie helped her mother gather dry grass for tinder while James crouched near the water, tossing pebbles. Gideon set about building the fire, methodical in his movements, his back turned to give Vera space without making a show of it. She approached him only after the flames had caught. "You said you had a brother." "I did," he answered, eyes on the fire. "Killed near Dodge. Shot trying to break up a card fight that wasn't his." She crouched beside him. "You the younger," he nodded, "by 5 years. What happened after?" "I buried him behind the church and left town before the sun came up. Never went back." She studied him. "You don't talk like a man who runs." "I don't, but there's a difference between running and leaving what's already dead." Vera didn't respond right away. Then she said, "We lived in a claim shanty outside of Helena. Soil was thin. My husband tried to grow beans where nothing ever wanted to grow. When he started borrowing, I didn't know how deep it went." Gideon passed her a tin cup of boiled creek water. "You stayed after he died." "I couldn't bring myself to leave until I had no choice." She looked past the fire, where her children were curled under a blanket. "James saw what Harlan tried to do. That's a weight I can't carry for him." "You don't have to." She gave him a sharp look. "He's my son. It's mine whether I want it or not." "I meant you don't have to carry it alone." The fire crackled between them. Somewhere nearby, an owl let out a single call. "I don't know what kind of man you are," she said. "I'm not asking you to. Then why help us? I've seen what happens when no one does." She stared into the flames, the lines around her mouth softening. "I've learned not to want much from men anymore." "Not asking you to want anything," Gideon said. "Just offering enough quiet to make up your own mind." Vera glanced toward her children again, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. "James asked me this morning if we were safe now." "What'd you tell him?" I said I didn't know. "That's honest. I'm tired of honest. I want sure." He leaned back on his elbows, looking up at the stars breaking over the tree line. "I can't promise you sure, ain't no such thing out here. But I can promise I'll ride beside you till you find your own." She looked at him long and hard, not blinking. "And when I do, then I'll still be riding. Up to you if you want the company." She stood, dusting off her skirt. I'll think about it. He watched her walk back to the children, her steps slow but measured. She lay between them, one arm curled around each child, eyes open long after theirs had closed. The next morning, she didn't need help saddling her horse, didn't ask where they were headed either. Just rode forward, the sun rising behind them, and Gideon following close enough to offer safety, far enough to offer respect. They crossed into the Musselshell River country under a low sky the color of cooled iron. The land stretched wide, silver grass brushing their stirrups, dotted with the occasional cottonwood bowing in the wind. Vera rode slightly ahead that morning, her eyes fixed forward, a quiet steadiness in the set of her shoulders. Josie had fallen asleep against her chest, lulled by the rhythm of the horse. James rode behind Gideon again, dry-eyed now, more alert than worn. At midday, they paused near a bluff where buffalo berries grew in thick clumps along the rock face. Gideon crouched to pick a few, sniffed the tart skin, and passed a handful to James, who checked with his mother before taking any. Vera gave a short nod, one eye still on the horizon. "This land always this empty?" she asked, brushing dust from Josie's collar. "Most times, yes," Gideon said, pulling a strip of canvas from his saddlebag. "But not dead, it waits, quiet's just how it breathes." "I don't mind quiet," she replied, "but empty's another thing." Gideon laid the canvas down on the ground and began cutting dried venison into thin strips. James watched, then eased forward to help, mimicking the angle of the knife and the press of palm to meet. Vera glanced over. "He's never handled a blade." Gideon didn't look up. "He's steady-handed, careful, that's more than most grown men." "He's 8, she said. "Eight's old enough to learn what a steady hand feels like." She didn't argue, but her eyes lingered. They made camp that night beneath an overhang of rock, sheltered from the wind. Vera gathered driftwood from the dry creek while Gideon set stones to hold the fire. Josie helped her mother sort kindling, dragging twigs twice her size across the dirt. When the fire caught, Vera sat with her knees drawn up, arms wrapped around them. "Did you ever have a place to settle?" she asked, her voice low. "Once," Gideon said, tossing a pine cone into the flames. "North of Cheyenne, ranch with a dozen-head little corn patch, belonged to a woman I thought I'd marry." Vera looked at him, the firelight catching the edge of her cheek. "What happened?" She wanted roots. "I didn't know how to stop moving." "Did she leave?" "No." "I did." A long pause passed between them. The fire popped. Josie stirred in her sleep but did not wake. "Do you regret it?" Vera asked. "Some days," he said. "Other days, I think maybe I wasn't meant for fences." Vera didn't look away. "You still move like a man who's looking for something." "Maybe I am." She didn't ask what. The next morning, the wind had shifted. The air carried the bite of distant smoke. Gideon smelled it first. He didn't say anything at once, just scanned the hills with his jaw set. They broke camp fast. Josie was still half asleep as Vera tied her into the saddle. James didn't ask questions, just mounted with a practiced swing that hadn't been there 2 days ago. They rode hard for the ridge, climbed it at an angle that made the horses sweat. Once at the top, Gideon stood in his stirrups and looked west. A faint haze curled along the horizon, too thick to be camp smoke. His eyes narrowed. "You think it's Harland?" Vera asked, her voice steady but taut. "Could be anyone," Gideon said. "But it's too close for comfort." She didn't need convincing. "If he's tracking, he'll expect us to keep running straight. Then we don't." They turned south, toward the shallow breaks where the land folded in on itself and trails vanished in the gullies. It was harder riding, but it bought them time. The sun hung low when they came upon a stretch of ravine where a spring seeped from the rock, feeding a pool ringed by reeds. Gideon dismounted first, checking the ground. No prints. "Nobody's been here in days." Vera helped Josie down and let her wade barefoot in the mud. James drank from the pool with cupped hands, then sat down to pull pebbles from his boot. Vera walked to where Gideon stood by the edge of the water, arms crossed. "You've known how to lose a trail before." "Yes. You ever have to lose your own?" He looked at her, his face unreadable. "You think I'm hiding something?" "I think most men are. I've got nothing to hide from you." She stepped closer, quiet. "You don't ask for anything." "Not even thanks." "Don't need it." "That's not common." "I'm not common. Vera searched his face, eyes dark and unreadable. "You don't want to fix me, don't even try to carry me. You just ride beside me like I'm already whole. You are," her breath caught. It wasn't surprise, more like recognition, the kind that settled in the body before it reached the mind. "I don't know how to be with someone who doesn't need me to be more or less than I am," she said. "Then don't be. Just ride." She glanced back at her children, then to the sun dipping behind the rocks. "I'm not ready to stop yet," she said. "I wouldn't ask you to." She nodded once, then reached down to scoop water into her palms. "We'll stay the night here, then ride at first light." Gideon nodded. "I'll keep watch." That night, Vera didn't lay between the children. She sat close to the fire, knees drawn in, eyes on the stars. Gideon sat across from her, silent, the space between them no longer measured by fear or need, but by choice. Neither of them spoke. They didn't have to. The stars turned overhead, and for the first time, the night didn't feel like something to survive. It felt like something beginning. The slope east of the ravine gave way to a long stretch of open basin where the wind carried the scent of dry sage and distant rain. They broke camp before the sky lightened, moving without talk. Josie slept across Vera's lap, wrapped in the same wool blanket they'd used the night before. James rode behind Gideon again, more upright than the day before, though he still held tight when the path grew narrow. They moved slower now, not from fear but calculation. Gideon kept to the edges of brush lines, using the terrain to shield them from sight. Vera didn't question the route anymore. Her gaze stayed forward, her hand resting near the rifle slung across her saddle. By mid-morning, they came across a shallow draw where the carcass of a mule deer lay sprawled among the grass, neck twisted unnaturally. Buzzards scattered as they approached, wings beating heavy air. Gideon dismounted first, scanning the slope. "Arrow through the lung," he said, pulling the shaft free. "Not an accident." Vera joined him, brow furrowed. "That's no settler's arrow." "No," he said. "It's Blackfeet." Her eyes moved over the hills. "You think they're nearby? Could have been a day ago, could have been 6. Hard to say." She didn't ask if it was safe. She didn't need reassurance. She just turned and walked back to the horses. They didn't stop again until the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the valley. They made camp near a cluster of cottonwoods, the trunks twisted from age and wind. James gathered dry bark without being asked. Josie helped Vera unroll the blankets. When the fire had burned down to coals, Vera sat beside Gideon, her legs stretched out before her, boots crossed at the ankles. "Harland ever come after anyone else?" he asked. She kept her eyes on the fire. "2 other women I knew. One disappeared. The other showed up at market with a broken jaw and no memory of the week before. You ever think of killing him?" She didn't answer right away. "Then, every day since I left," Gideon nodded once. "You still planning to?" "I don't know," she said. "Part of me wants to ride straight back and end it. Other part wants to keep going and never look over my shoulder again. Both parts make sense. What would you do?" "I used to think justice came from a bullet and a steady hand. Now I think it comes from building something he can never touch." She turned her head. "You think I can do that?" "I know you can." Her jaw tightened, but she didn't look away. "You speak like a man who's seen too much and still believes." "I've seen enough to know what matters," he said. "And I believe in what I see." She looked down, drawing a line in the dirt with the toe of her boot. "You don't know me well enough to believe in me. I know what I've seen these last few days. That's enough." Vera didn't reply. The wind picked up, rustling the cottonwood leaves overhead. Josie shifted in her sleep, murmuring something soft and unintelligible. James had fallen asleep with his hand still curled around a piece of flint. Vera stood, brushing her hands off on her skirt. "I'll take the first watch." Gideon looked up at her. "You trust me to sleep." "I trust you not to leave," she said, then added, quieter, "and that's more than I've given anyone in a long time." She walked to the edge of the trees and leaned against a trunk, rifle slung over her shoulder. Her silhouette was still, strong, framed by the dying glow of the fire. When dawn came, they rode with the sun at their backs. The land began to shift again, less open, more broken. Rock outcroppings rose from the grass, and the trail narrowed into a split between 2 low ridges. They passed an abandoned wagon half sunk in the earth, wheels missing, its boards silvered and splintered from years of weather. Vera slowed her horse. Miles City's still a week off, maybe more. You sure that's where you're headed? I was, Gideon said. Now I'm not sure it matters. She looked over at him, her face unreadable. You change your course often? No, just when the ride changes. Vera studied him for a long moment. Then she said, I've been thinking on something, all right. My children, they don't look over their shoulders anymore, not the way they did. He nodded, letting her speak. That's not nothing. No, Gideon said, it isn't. She looked ahead again, her voice lower. I don't know what comes next, but I want it to be real, not just surviving. It can be. She turned slightly in her saddle. If I rode with you longer, not just for safety, not just until the trouble fades, would you want that? He didn't answer right away. The horse's hooves moved in rhythm over the dry trail. I would, he said at last, but I wouldn't ask for it, only ride beside you, same as now. Vera's mouth lifted, not quite a smile, but something close. Then keep riding, Gideon Kirkland, and he did. The wind shifted again 3 days later, bringing with it the scent of river water and the mossy breath of lowland cottonwoods. By then, the land had softened into long, sloping hills, and the first signs of settlement began to appear, wagon ruts half filled with rain, a chicken feather caught in a fence post, the glint of tin roofing in the distance. They were getting close to the edge of Miles City's reach. Vera rode with her chin lifted, eyes forward, but her hands had relaxed on the reins. The children had begun to speak more freely, Josie asking about wildflowers, James identifying birds by call. Gideon kept to her right, always close enough to hear her speak, never close enough to press. Late one afternoon, they stopped near a homestead ruin, just the bones of a chimney and a stone well, the roof long gone. Gideon stepped down first and walked the perimeter, then crouched to check the ground near the hearth. Someone tried to grow here, he said. Maybe 5 winters back. Vera dismounted carefully, her back stiff. Didn't last, no, he said, but the well's still clean. She knelt to draw a bucket up, her sleeves rolled high. You think about settling again, sometimes. She didn't look at him. Where? That depends. On what? On who'd be staying with me. Vera dipped a ladle into the bucket. That woman back near Cheyenne, what would she say if she saw you now? I don't think she'd recognize me. She handed him the ladle. I don't think I would have either. Not the man you were then. He drank the water slow, then handed it back. You think I've changed? I know I have, she said. They didn't speak again until the sun dropped behind the hills. Josie curled up beside Vera near the fire, and James lay with his head resting on a folded coat. Gideon sat across from her, legs stretched out, his rifle across his lap out of habit, not fear. Vera's voice was quiet but sure. I've thought a lot about what kind of life I want for them. For you too, I hope. She met his eyes across the fire. That part's harder. Not for me, he said. He waited, not leaning forward, not reaching for her, just letting the space fill without pressure. Vera rubbed her thumb along the seam of her boot. I want to live somewhere that doesn't feel like hiding. I want to plant something and see it come up the next spring. I want Josie to run without fear and James to stop flinching when someone raises their voice. Gideon said, You want a home. I do. He looked past her toward the trees. I know a place not far from here, flat land, good soil, close enough to town for supplies, far enough for quiet. It's empty now, but there's a barn still standing, and I know how to build a roof. She stared at him, expression unreadable. That's not a small offer. It isn't, and I don't make it lightly. Vera stood slowly, brushing the dirt from her skirt. She crossed the fire and sat beside him, close enough their knees touched. I won't be easy, she said. I'm not soft, I don't forget wrongs quick, and I've never lived with a man who didn't turn cruel when the world turned hard. I won't be easy either, he said, but I don't turn cruel. I turn quiet, she nodded once. Then she leaned her head against his shoulder, careful, not uncertain, just slow. He didn't move, didn't speak. Just let her rest there. When morning came, they broke camp with silent coordination, the kind that no longer needed words. They rode until the land dipped into long, flat stretches with cottonwoods lining a slow stream. Gideon slowed his horse and pointed toward a rise where a barn leaned slightly east. That's it, he said. Vera didn't speak right away. She passed the rise, circled the edge of the field, eyes moving over the soil, the line of the tree break, the angle of sun through the barn slats. Then she turned back and met Gideon's gaze. "This'll do," she said. They spent the next week mending. James helped Gideon clear the field while Vera patched the gaps in the barn wall. Josie dragged stones to outline a garden bed and named each one. At night, they cooked over a shared fire. Sleep came easier. No one watched the trees anymore. On the 8th evening, Vera stood in the doorway of the barn, hands on her hips, watching the wind ripple over the grass. "You still planning to ride on?" she asked. "No," Gideon said, stepping behind her. "I'm done running," she turned. "So am I." He reached out and took her hand, not asking, just taking it like it had always been his. She stepped into him, and he kissed her slow, sure, the way a man kissed a woman he'd waited his whole life to find. They didn't speak after. They didn't need to. The next morning, James ran barefoot across the yard and whooped when he found a rabbit track near the fence. Josie shrieked with laughter when it darted away. Vera watched them from the doorway, her arms folded, sunlight warming her face. Gideon came up behind her, slid an arm around her waist, and rested his chin on her shoulder. "They look happy," he said. "They are, you," she leaned into him. "I never thought I'd get to be. You've earned it." They stood there, watching the children chase the wind. The grass bent low and rose again. The sky was wide and clean, and the air smelled like turned earth and rain far off. Inside, the hearth was ready for a fire. The garden bed was waiting, and so were they, side by side, for every season to come.